2 completed seasons of competitive flat ground skateboarding currently account for 1,424 trick attempts with 16 unique contestants at 2 different Los Angeles locations in a span of 17 weeks. Season 2's conclusion in the middle of one of skateboarding's kryptonites from Mother Nature in late cold January was a miracle thanks to Mickey Papa humbly providing the pin to a covered spot with adequate smooth flat ground, where 18 total games ran their respective courses between 10 competitors in roughly 2 hours. Unlike Season 1, where only 1 game was played at a time, Season 2 progressed much more efficiently thanks to Kelly Hart's recommendation of having 2 games played simultaneously like they did back in the trade show S Game of Skate days from the early 2000s. While the efficiency ended up helping to make up for the roughly 1-hour delay from changing locations, it pulled away camera resources down to 1 angle per game instead of the 3 per game from Season 1, and also thinned out the audience size per game. These changes from Season 1 to Season 2, along with only 2 of the original 8 competitors from Season 1 returning, resulted in a drastic drop in drama and controversy, which in turn resulted in what some could say was a sophomore slump as far as views are concerned. Even with an additional 4 games and 2 competitors, Season 2's average view count per match within the first month was less than 20,000 per video, which included an exclusive intro video featuring competitor interviews. Season 1's average view count per video in its first month was 50,000, almost triple the average view count per video compared to Season 2. The drama, sunshine, controversy, relatively bigger names, intrigue, and forced rematch in the grand finals undoubtedly played major roles in driving viewer traffic from Season 1, all of which to a certain extent were missing in Season 2, likely leaving only the core Game of Skate fans watching the second season. Regardless, Season 2 had closer games on average with an arguably deeper pool of talent than Season 1, and now an ELO system is established to measure how well everyone in the matches stack up with each other. As a refresher, for those unfamiliar with ELO, it's a ranking system that uses math to give a score to the contestants after they compete, and the higher the score, the better you rank, the lower the score, the worse you rank. Without further ado, let's dive into Season Dos. As it stands, 5 of the 16 skaters to compete in CFS share the unenviable status of not winning a game. And according to ELO, Noah Chin has the current lowest score at 827. One reason Noah's ELO was affected so much compared to other winless skaters was because his first match was against CFS 1 returner Jeff Dezere, whose overall ranking in Season 1 paled in comparison to Season 2, meaning Jeff's relatively low ELO of 882 heading into the new season put him as the underdog in his first game against Noah, where anyone who is in their first ever game, including Noah in this case, starts fresh with a default ELO of 1,000. Noah managed to give Jeff 1 letter on that damn big spin, but Jeff identified the inward heel weakness and exploited it, giving Noah 3 letters from inward heel variations, 1 on a nollie tray, and another letter on a 33% defensively successful nollie big heel. The statistical highlight for Noah in that game was defending a switch backside heel flip, a trick that only 44% of CFS competitors defend. Noah's loss to Jeff placed him in the minor bracket, where he would face Brian Arnett, who had just finished his 3rd game, a victory against Chin's fellow winless competitor Ricky Glazer. If you're wondering why Brian had already played 3 games when Noah had just got done with his first, it's because the structure of a double elimination bracket with 10 skaters means that 4 of the 10 would essentially need to prove themselves as worthy of progressing in the major bracket, while the remaining 6 enjoyed a relatively advantageous placing due to their history in flat ground contests. Brian has shown that he's no slouch at flat ground, but not necessarily in a semi-serious contest environment. And as biased as it might sound, Noah is easily one of, if not the best flat ground local at Santa Clarita, who I've personally witnessed win virtually every game of skate he's been in, justifying Chin's spot as the 6th seed instead of the 7th seed that was assigned to Brian. By the time he needed to face Chin, Arnett had won his first game, lost his second, then won his third, making him an early minor bracket standout and Cinderella candidate. Noah's game against Brian had 62,714 turnovers, and maybe the world's first ever instance of a back-to-back primo fatality to ever go down in an official game of skate. But seriously, there were 15 turnovers out of 29 offensive turns, meaning that more than 50% of offensive turns in Noah versus Brian's game were misses. A statistic that is more than 25% higher than the average rate of turnovers per CFS game so far. Before the turnovers, Noah looked like he would potentially build offensive momentum early, giving Brian S on a backside 360 on the 6th turn. But Chin's fixation on attempting and missing a nollie varial flip 5 times gave Arnett too many opportunities to whittle away at Noah, and their game ended with a 4-letter margin of victory, eliminating Chin from further progression and propelling Brian further into the minor bracket. By the way, it's worth noting that even though Noah has the current lowest ELO at 827, he did have an ELO that was higher heading into his game against Brian. This analysis is simply highlighting the polarity between the lows and highs of the contestants and is not meant to shame anyone for not performing as well as they could have. Ricky Glazer ranks just ahead of Noah near the bottom of the ELO rankings with a personal low ELO of 874 after losing his second game to, yep, you guessed correctly, Brian Arnett. Ricky had a couple uncontrollable factors working against him off the rip, including being under the already abysmal weather and being on the losing end of an admittedly questionable call from the ref in the first game, where he lost to Lamont Holt. Ricky's first game shifted into his favor after Lamont gave away his opening turn, but Glazer also gave up offense thrice, which ultimately handed too many opportunities to Holt to grind down Ricky with eclectic and dangerous front 3-pop variations. The ref giving a thumbs up to Lamont's obvious toe drag on the backside hard flip death blow was one of the most egregious oversights from the officials that day, and Ricky's lack of protest and inability to defend the trick shoved Ricky into the minor bracket to face Brian. As mentioned before, Brian had 2 games behind him by the time he faced Ricky in the minor bracket, and apart from the turnover insanity that ensued in the Noah versus Brian game, Ricky and Brian had 12 turnovers in their relatively longer 42-turn matchup. Turnovers in a game of skate are kind of like air balls, and when you have a lot of air balls in one game, it doesn't make for a great watching experience because the game is kind of dragging in a sort of stalemate, and stalemates are uncomfortable, and no one likes being uncomfortable. There were definitely highlights in the Ricky versus Brian game, however, including Glazer's successful defense against Arnett's fakie double, and Brian's successful and perfectly wrapped defensive impossible, a trick that plagued the first season with drama and controversy that ironically shows up one time in season 2 and has no issues. That was pretty much it though. Ricky snagged a defensive switch hard, which, believe it or not, is 71% successful on defense in CFS so far. And while Glazer managed to get 3 letters on Arnett, Brian ironically beat Ricky on the same trick that Lamont beat Ricky on in their first game, tragically concluding Ricky Glazer's path as a competitor in CFS 2. Peter Granis, who you undoubtedly know as the long-standing president of skateboarding, carved out just enough time from his packed schedule to exhibit his impressive flat ground arsenal. But as fate would have it, Mr. Granis was the third and final winless competitor of CFS 2, locking in a final ELO of 904 before losing his second game against Lamont Holt. Brian is yet again part of another winless competitor's story, where Peter's first game was a dreaded skunk. A match where the winner dominates their opponent without suffering a single letter. In defense of Granis, Brian won rock, paper, scissors, and in the style of Tom Asta, retained offensive control from start to finish. While Peter did defend several tricks, this 19-turn game was the second shortest of the day, pushing Granis to the minor bracket where he would face Lamont Holt. Lamont was fresh off a close loss to Tom Asta, hence the minor bracket meeting with Peter, and this game was easily a much better one for Granis than his first. Some might argue Kelly was a little too strict about not giving Peter the green light on the defensive fakie front 3-pop, but Mr. Granis did not back down from a fakie double flip, fakie hard flip, and a regular hard flip. Peter's strong defense led to a potential momentum shift when Lamont turned over offense on a missed nollie big heel, with Granis tying the game A to A on 3 different varial flip variations. 4 consecutive turnovers followed, then Lamont got T from a fakie frontside flip, and that's when disaster struck. Either the president's unpaid intern did not advise Mr. Granis on the CFS rules, or Peter was temporarily drunk with power and thought he could abuse his high-ranking status as a means to illegally touch his board on a finger flip attempt, not once, but twice. Only the most harrowing predictions can describe what type of catastrophic outcomes would have devastated anyone within a 500-foot radius of the event if Mr. Granis landed the finger flip, but after missing the second one, Lamont ended both the game and Peter's CFS2 bracket progression with a nollie big spin heel flip. The remaining 7 competitors from CFS2 won at least one game, and the lowest maximum ELO from someone who won a game was Moose, with 1044 after beating Tre Flip 101 in his first game. Similar to Noah, Tre Flip 101's 5th seed rank granted him a privileged placing in the bracket, mainly because of his relatively recent overall win of the Santa Clarita Game of Skate hosted by Push Skate School. Consequently, this game between 4th-ranked Moose and 5th-ranked Tre Flip ended up being the closest game between 2 first-timers in CFS so far, concluding with a 1-letter margin of victory. Moose quickly gave Tre Flip 101, who was even more under the weather than Ricky, 4 letters in 12 turns, but Tre Flip managed to clutch a big flip and fend off a death blow, before Moose turned over offense on a missed double flip. Tre Flip took advantage of the offensive opportunity and quickly established himself as the villain of CFS2, throwing out toe flip variations and shove-it reverts that did a lot of damage. This game also featured another major oversight on the officiating during the toe flip process. First, Tre Flip definitely heel touched on the offensive toe varial flip, but considering Moose's advantageous lack of letters, the ref understandably let that slide in Tre Flip's favor. However, what happened next was just pure confusion. Tre Flip attempted a regular toe varial flip. Moose thought it was switch, so he attempted it switch. Neither Tre Flip nor Kelly seemed to notice this detail, and at this point, Moose received his 3rd letter. But someone off camera, who was paying more attention than anyone else, called out that Moose erroneously attempted the wrong trick. Normally, if someone tries the wrong trick on defense, it's intentional from the defender and they simply get a letter. But in this case, Moose genuinely thought Tre Flip did a switch toe varial flip compared to the first backside toe flip. To be fair, it makes sense that toe flips being introduced out of nowhere in front of people who aren't familiar with that type of pressure trick make them hard to differentiate between what's a backside toe flip versus a toe varial flip, or was it switch or regular, compared to the traditional kickflip and heel flip fundamentals that we all know and love. And this is mainly because toe flips are pressure type tricks that honestly might lead to a future rule of no pressure tricks allowed. Regardless, technically toe flips are not breaking any current rules, and Moose was granted a redo. But before he could, Tre Flip already attempted an offensive front pop revert that needed a redo. Kelly managed to clean up the mess and give Moose a proper shot to defend the original toe varial flip, which he missed, and give Tre Flip a redo on the front pop revert, which he landed. But the true hero was whoever brought to light Moose's incorrect attempt. Luckily for Moose, Tre Flip missed the shifty toe flip, and Moose won on a nollie double flip, staying in the major bracket where he would progress to face Tom Asta. Tom was coming fresh off of a win from his first game, making his matchup with Moose the first game between 2 winners of CFS2 at that point. Nothing too crazy to report about this game though. Tom did what he does by not only being well above the overall 77% offensive consistency rate at 82%, but also having an overwhelmingly high offensive make volume relative to his counterparts, with 142 total makes on offense across 2 seasons. Moose did what he could, but was slowly picked apart by Tom in 39 turns, unable to defend a nollie hard flip and transferring him to the minor bracket where he would face Brian! Moose's loss to Tom made him the underdog against Brian, who had already played 4 games, winning 3 of them, compared to Moose's 1 win and 1 loss. Arnett had racked up some ELO momentum, favoring him to beat Moose before the game started, but Moose was able to inflict a couple letters worth of damage to Brian before falling victim to a variety of YouTube-flavored monstrosities, including a forward flip, half-cab double flip, backside double flip, and perhaps the day's most diabolical trick to win a game, the forward double kickflip, ending Moose's journey in CFS2. Next up is Tre Flip 101, who edged out Moose with a maximum ELO of 1063 following his game with Lamont. Coming off of the loss to Moose, Tre Flip faced Lamont in the minor bracket after Lamont lost to Tom. This game was the shortest of CFS2 at 18 turns, and currently stands as the most difficult to win, with a match trick consistency rate of, yep, you guessed it, 23%. roughly 40% below average, and when you see what tricks went down in this game, that statistic makes perfect sense. Lamont opened the game with a toxic bag of front 3-pop variations, but unfortunately missed a fakey double flip, and even though Tre Flip felt like shit, he did not let go of his precious opportunity at offense. Tre Flip's defensive success rate might be the second lowest in CFS2 at 26%, but Holt's below average 43% defensive rate did not do him any favors, missing a half cab heel and a 360 flip before getting brutally executed by the Tre Flip trifecta front pop revert, backside toe flip, and toe varial flip. Tre Flip 101 would consequently stay alive in the minor bracket, going on to face Jeff Dezere. It looked like Tre Flip was going to quickly end this game, getting Jeff down to T in 20 turns, but the backside toe flip consistency wasn't high enough for Tre Flip to finish Dezere on that trick, giving Jeff a second chance to come back. There was an interesting development earlier in that game where Jeff somehow thought he would get a redo after popping and jumping off his board, but an official review determined that he in fact was not going to get away with that. That being said, Jeff overcame the mental hurdle of that distraction and performed well under the pressure of having letter T while his opponent was letterless, giving Tre Flip 101 the same inward heel exploitation treatment Noah suffered earlier, which led to the conclusion of Tre Flip 101's CFS2 journey. Lamont Holt had the third lowest maximum ELO out of anyone who won at least one game in CFS2 with 1083. Lamont's victory against Ricky netted him a relatively high 84 ELO points, and it turns out that prior to facing Tom, both Asta and Holt's pregame ELOs were the closest in value of the day, differing by less than 0.5 points. This was Tom's first game of CFS2, where he was coming off of 2 straight losses to Seva in the grand finals from Season 1, negatively impacting his ELO, and while by a slim margin, statistically making him the underdog against Lamont. The tight pre-battle ELO score spread rang true in Tom and Lamont's game, which ended up being a T-to-T nail-biter, mainly thanks to Lamont's clutch defense later in the game. Similar to Lamont's other games, he opened aggressively with 2 front 3-pop variations, giving Tom 2 letters early. But yet another offensive miss by Holt on the fakey double gave Asta control of the game. Tom picked apart Lamont down to letter T over a span of 20 turns, including another gruesome primo fatality on a nollie kickflip. But Holt was given one more chance to set tricks after Asta missed a nollie hard flip. Lamont revisited a pair of double flips that gave Tom another pair of letters, and suddenly the game was tied T to T. Holt missed a fakey front big spin, giving Tom back control, at which time he reintroduced the nollie hard, and Lamont defended the 54% successful trick, easily the highlight of the game. But Asta's switch 360 flip right after made the clutch defense short-lived, and as we've discussed, Lamont was able to manage one win in the minor bracket against Peter, but would lose his next minor bracket game against Tre Flip 101. In this case, Lamont's 4-letter margin of victory from his first game against Ricky is what propelled him to have a relatively high maximum ELO compared to Tre Flip 101, who ended up progressing further than Holt but never had a higher ELO due to variables like margin of victory, match difficulty, and match length. Breaching the 1100 ELO score and ranking 4th highest of the day was Brian Arnett with 1145. 4 of the 6 games Brian competed in have already been mentioned, leaving his second major bracket game and his final game for review. Brian's opening game win against Ricky kept him in the major bracket, where he faced Mickey Papa. As of today, this is the most viewed game of the second season at just under 30,000 views. A few reasons why include the game's clear highlight: Brian landing a perfect forward flip even after snapping his board in half, then proceeding to excel in the game with multiple other completes, a primo slam that you could feel through the screen, and basically Brian skating very well as the arguable underdog, on defense in particular. Brian landed 10 tricks on defense in this game, and 3 of the last 4 he landed were clutch makes that prevented him from getting E, including the 12.5% nollie double flip, 30% switch 360 flip, and 57% fakey big heel flip. Not to mention landing the 20% regular big heel flip first try on defense. We also got the signature Brian Arnett late shoves, and the game came down to a 1-letter margin of victory before Mickey finally won on a 50% switch big flip. Brian's loss put him in the minor bracket where he went on to win 3 games in a row and accumulate ELO before needing to face Jeff in the second to last minor bracket game. Unlike his game with Mickey, Brian's performance against Jeff was relatively much worse, suffering the day's 3rd skunk in 27 turns. Jeff wasted no time in spamming inward heel variations to secure a swift victory after Brian's unfortunate turnover on a backside flip, ending our net's 6-game CFS2 journey. The 3rd highest ELO of CFS2 goes to Tom Asta, with a score of 1187. Tom's pair of victories early in the major bracket against Lamont and Moose led him to face fellow undefeated major bracket opponent Mickey Papa, in what is currently the longest flat ground game in CFS at 98 turns. No funny business to be found in this game between 2 flat ground gods, with the hardest trick defended being a 33% nollie big heel by Mickey, and for Tom, the 50% switch big flip. The game ended up being T to T, but Mickey's defensive edge and Tom's busted bearing toward the final turns gave Papa the win, and Tom would need to immediately turn around and face Jeff in the minor bracket finals. Heading into this matchup, Jeff was the pregame favorite, given his pair of wins leading up to the game, one of them being a skunk, combined with Tom's recent loss that dropped his peak ELO of the day from 1187 down to 1128 versus Dezere's 1166. Tom won rock, paper, scissors, and proceeded to hold offense for 37 turns, the day's 2nd longest opening offensive sequence, giving Jeff 3 letters before missing a switch varial heel. Dezere did not squander his chance at offense, quickly attempting to capitalize on the inward heel success he'd enjoyed so far, but Tom fended off both the regular and nollie variation before things went downhill quickly for Asta. Jeff's switch inward, switch varial flip, nollie big heel, and double flip all gave Tom 4 consecutive letters, and even with a second chance to retain control of the game, a missed switch front heel, a trick he's currently 50% offensively successful with in CFS, gave Jeff Dezere his second chance to end the game, which he did on a switch varial flip body varial. Side note, Tom actually landed this trick like a day or 2 later in a game against Dan Corrigan. Regardless, Jeff secured his place in the grand finals against Mickey Papa, and Tom's CFS2 journey ended with a 3rd place showing, a hard-to-watch hug from the socially awkward event host, and $100 in cash. The 2nd highest ELO of CFS2 goes to Jeff Dezere, with 1220, following his victory against Tom. For most people, there are good flat ground days, there are average flat ground days, and there are bad flat ground days. For Jeff, at CFS2, he had an exceptionally impressive flat ground day. Jeff landed 117 tricks across 6 games, only 7 tricks behind Mickey, but led the entire field in offensive make volume at 73 and consistency by a lot at 88%, nearly 10% ahead of the day's rate. Dezere's consistency carried him to the grand finals where he would face Battle at the Barracks 9 runner-up Mickey Papa. Jeff already played Mickey earlier in the bracket in a solid 81-turn game that had only 3 turnovers. Papa ultimately won that game with a 2-letter margin of victory, and because of double elimination, Mickey's earlier win against Jeff meant that if Jeff lost again to Mickey in the grand finals, the contest would be over. Mickey and Jeff's second meeting was even better than their first, clocking in a 58% match difficulty rate compared to their previous game's 63%. Jeff won rock, paper, scissors and beat Tom Asta's 37-turn opening offensive streak by 2 turns, but was only able to give Mickey 1 letter in the process. Ironically, with the switch varial flip body varial that ended the prior game with Tom. Mickey gave Jeff 4 letters in his first chance at offense, but a missed switch big flip gave Dezere another shot to get dirty. And boy oh boy, did Jeff open the gates of advanced fundamental flat ground hell when he managed to roll away from a 0% nollie frontside inward heel flip and 0% half cab inward heel flip, giving Papa a pair of letters before Jeff missed his second offensive nollie varial flip. Mickey's switch big flip make looked like the game would finally conclude, but Dezere's determined defensive delivery during a damn near do or die moment decided a longer duration was definitively destined. Mickey missed a big heel, and Jeff landed what I would argue was his best looking trick of the day apart from his effortless switch heels, when he landed the nollie big flip. A trick I presume was chosen on purpose considering Mickey's highly pivoted nollie bigger flip death blah, 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 from their last game, and it paid off, tying the game T to T. Jeff missed what would have easily been a dangerous inward heel flip body varial, and Mickey's big spin heel flip proved to be too much for Dezere, eliminating now second place Jeff from further progression, as well as the need for a direct rematch, and giving an undefeated Papa the day's highest ELO of 1253. Upon reflection, Jeff's inward heel flips did less and less damage as the bracket tapered into the final games, especially on Mickey Papa, who landed all 4 inward heel flips on defense in one game. Something only Sean Malto can also claim as far as what I've seen when he defended all 4 inward heels against Chris Colburn in Season 10, Round 2. What else is there really to say, besides the fact that Mickey Papa is a consistency king at virtually every flip trick in every stance, and he lands bolts? But perhaps the most important detail to point out is that Mickey's 79.5% defensive consistency rate not only outshined all CFS 2 contestants by a double-digit margin, but it's even higher than all CFS 1 competitors, including Zach, Tom, Chris Chan, and Seva. And to further drive home how impressive the high defensive rate is, Mickey also landed the most tricks on defense at 62, 18 more than second-ranked Jeff. Going first in a game of skate is of course one way to have an advantage, but from what I've seen, it's a strong defensive consistency that will put you in the best position to succeed. Looking at the Barry's list of best defensive consistency, it's pretty clear that the champions, runner-ups, and finals night contestants are all concentrated near the top of the rankings. This is additional supporting data that suggests how important defense is if you want to do well in a game of skate contest.
I'm just like, dude, honestly, like, I don't care anymore.
And that concludes the CFS2 analysis. Hopefully there will be a third, but until then, drive safe.